Hello again. Let's talk about sweetening agents. Sweetness is almost always the first flavor we want to add to an unflavored shake. Some commercial flavorings have a sweetener in them, but sometimes we just want to do our own sweetening, maybe alone or with some basic flavor like vanilla. There are many things that will sweeten a mix. The most obvious is sugar. It's inexpensive, costing a tiny fraction of a penny per gram, but it takes quite a lot of sugar to sweeten a 2-liter jar of meal replacement, and that adds calories. So if you want to have a certain amount of calories in a meal, you have to scale back the meal powder in proportion to the sugar you will add. Adding sugar raises the glycemic index, which is of concern to diabetics and pre-diabetics. And in general, nutrition nerds just hate sugar and blame it for all kinds of evil effects. It's possible to add sweetness without raising calories by using one of the many sugar substitutes. Some are well known. Aspartame, sometimes sold as equal, and sucralose, sometimes sold as Splenda. And there's a plant extract, stevia. I've made a little Google sheet comparing all these and some others, and there's a link to that in the description under this video. Of the, quote, artificial, unquote, sweeteners, maybe the least controversial is sucralose. It's a powder that is 200 times as sweet as sugar by weight. Soylent 1.8 lists sucralose as an ingredient, and yet Soylent 1.8 does not taste sweet. I think they just added just a trace of sucralose as a way to mask some other flavor, perhaps the bitterness from a vitamin or a saltiness from an electrolyte component. For my experiments, I'm not using sucralose or aspartame or any of the, quote, chemical, unquote, compounds. Also, I am not using stevia because it has a bitter aftertaste to me, as it does for many. No, I am following the lead of AxJoe at Super Body Fuel, where they use Monkfruit extract for a sweetener. Monkfruit is a melon that grows in some regions of China. Its pulp yields a sweetener that is even more powerful than sucralose at 350 times as sweet as sugar by weight. For every sugar substitute, there is a minority of people for whom it will taste bad or metallic or bitter or whatever. And for every substitute, there will be a small, even smaller minority of people for whom it causes some kind of allergic reaction, like headaches. Maybe because it has been less used so far, there are fewer of these complaints about monkfruit than other sweeteners. To me, monkfruit just tastes sweet with no aftertaste. The raw powder itself has a bit of a musty odor, but that disappears when it's dissolved. Now, the fact that monkfruit is so incredibly strong, 300 times as sweet as the same weight of sugar, causes a bit of a problem. In my experiments, I want to work with small quantities, say adding flavor to a 100 gram, 100 calorie portion of a shake, and then I can add very small quantities of some flavorant, drop by drop, and when I find the right taste, it's easy to scale up to a 500 gram meal or a 2-liter pitcher. Well, at these small quantities, the amount of monkfruit powder is just ridiculously tiny. It's hard to dispense such small amounts of powder and hard to get them to mix up thoroughly. The monkfruit doesn't like to dissolve into a cold liquid, I found. To solve this, I've adopted a method of diluting the monkfruit powder with 9 parts of water by weight. I put 5 grams of the powder in a container and add 45 grams of warm water and shake it up. And the result is a tea-colored liquid that is 1/10 monkfruit. I call it monkfruit liquor. I can easily dispense this liquid through a syringe in fractions of a gram and then divide by 10 to know how much actual monkfruit powder I've added. So my first experiments were to add monk fruit liquor gradually to samples of my base powders, and I found that a total of just 1.2 grams of monk fruit, that is 12 cc's of my liquor, was enough to flavor a whole 2-liter pitcher of Superfuel Plain. That tiny amount of sweetener completely cancels out the salty taste of the plain Superfuel and leaves it with just a mild, pleasant sweetness. About the same amount of monk fruit gives Soylent 1.8, also a mild sweetness that I like better than the original neutral taste. And it somewhat mitigates the oily aftertaste, although that is still present. So that's it for sweeteners, a tiny amount of monk fruit and an unflavored meal replacement, and you have a mildly sweet product. In the next segment, I'll tell you about another common flavor. See you then.